So what this is the 8 sessions that we're going to be talking about are focused around the Quality Matters framework. But we're going to be looking at it from, like I said, a very informal point of view. And so we're going to kind of go through that little bits and pieces at a time and break that down into what are some things that I can really focus on making some changes to my current practices in order to improve my course. So in doing so, I'm going to be taking you into the courses that I teach or have taught and talking you through my viewpoint of my own courses. And our hope is that you will do the same with your own courses. And so this is not going to be a thing where, you know, we're going to have you stick your course on the screen and we're all going to evaluate it, or I'm going to evaluate it. Nothing like that. But we want to give you an opportunity to kind of use the model of Quality Matters to look at online course design. And so one of the things that Quality Matters is really focused on is that it is a continuous process and it is a learning process for all. So there are no negatives in this. You know, we've all done what we needed to get to where we are today. And so we're going to look at, you know, what are some things that we can change along the way. So I am going to do a little bit of slides, but most of this is going to be interacting inside of Moodle and other resources. So I'm going to get it started for a minute and hopefully go to the next slide. So today we're going to cover a total of 6 topics. So we're going to talk about, and these 6 topics are all related to, this whole entire first session is all tied into General Standard 1 for Quality Matters. And so that's where the title came from. And so there are 6 basic things that are very easy that can be addressed that really would allow your course to be certified within that first general standard. And that's what we're going to focus in on this session. So the first topic, getting started and how to find course components. The second topic is the purpose and structure of the course. Topic 3, online communication expectations, instructor introductions, student introductions, and housekeeping. And like I said, in today's session, this is not going to be where I'm going to go through a slideshow and I'm going to go through slides that tell you what you should be doing. I'm actually going to be taking you into my courses and tell you about this information with lessons learned. And in doing so, I did want to back up 1 minute because you'll notice in topic 4 that it says instructor introductions. And I did ask all of you to kind of introduce yourself through the chat so that we weren't spending time in our session today going through that. And I didn't introduce myself intentionally for a purpose because I'm going to get to instructor introductions in a minute with my own introduction. Everyone should be enrolled in the course, and you most likely got an email a little bit ago where an announcement was posted, and I have a video inside of there where I introduce myself, and I'll use that to talk about topic 4. So as we get into this session, we're going to start with something that is called the 2-minute test. So the 2-minute test, if you're not familiar with it, Smith 2014 says, to my surprise, the learners indicated that they make a decision about whether their online course will be a good or a bad one within the first 2 minutes of their initial login to the course. Strictly on visual, not clicking on content most of the time, just 2 minutes looking at the course, and they've already made their mind up. So I'm going to do my own 2-minute test. We're going to do that together on a course. And so I will preface this. So in introducing ourselves, one of the things is that I did work at Mitchell for a short stint back in the fall of 2016. And while there, I did teach CIS 110 for a semester. And so I'm going to use what's left of that course shell to kind of go through, and we're going to do a 2-minute test on that course in 2 ways. We're going to look at how it was originally, and we're going to look at some of the ideas that I've had for kind of revamping what a course might look like in terms of CIS 110, which is Introduction to Computers, if you're not familiar with that course. So I'm going to bring the course up, So I want to minimize, I want to escape from the presentation for just a minute. Okay. So this is a copy of, and you can see fall 2016 CIS 110 1D. And I want to, don't ignore the first part for a minute because I want to jump down to, I believe it's module 3, computer security and privacy. And so this module is exactly the way it was when I taught the course. And so when we think of looking at a course from all that we know internally as faculty, as students, whatever role we've served in education, and I start to scroll down through this module 3, I can see there's something that says August 30th through September 5th. I'm going to talk you through this 2-minute review of the course real fast so that we're not just kind of staring in different things. But there's what's actually, I know it as a label, but it just randomly says August 30th through September 5th. It doesn't say, you know, what that has to do with. I can see that this must be a link that has something to do with everyday cybercrime and what you can do about it. And then there's some kind of cybersecurity lab. And I'm assuming I'm supposed to click on those. Oh, here's something on free virus protection options for 2016. There's something on class attendance. And then I scroll down and I see graded assignments. And so I see that there's a discussion forum. I see that there's an assignment. I see that they have a due date and everything else. But when I look at the content from a kind of like lens of reviewing it from a student perspective, I look at my own content and I see that it's a bunch of stuff all over the place. And I do have a label that tells me graded assignments, so I assume that that's what I'm supposed to do. But there's no instructions, there's no directions, there's no kind of how do we get from one piece to the next. So when I give my own course the 2-minute tests, then I kind of end up in a place where, let me bring the presentation back up because this kind of, these two things goes hand in hand, this slide and the next one. So let me bring the next slide up. And it puts me in, or can put people in, a state of being uncomfortable. And so when I talk about this, when I talk about being uncomfortable, we have to keep a few things in mind in this process. You're still going to be the subject matter expert. In this case, it's going to be CIS 110 for me. For each of you, it's a different, I've seen some English, I've seen some history, some business, some econ. We have several different types of instructors in the course. We're going to be the subject matter experts. We may and probably are not going to be the technology or technical experts. But honestly, is that what we want to be? No, that's not necessarily what we strive to be. Of course, you're going to have questions about online learning and the LMS. That is a given. We're all going to have those. But do you have time to learn everything there is to know about all of it? No, no one does. I do not, you do not, none of us do. We don't have time to learn everything there is about all of it. So prioritizing things that you need to know in order to teach your course is important. And so when we talk about this, one of the things that, you know, being uncomfortable, I'll be the first to admit, you know, we have learning hoops to jump through in different ways, each of us, when it comes to this process, from all the technology that's involved, not just setting up the course, but also in managing the course in a couple different things. So I'll tell a couple personal stories that have already happened since fall and spring in terms of my being uncomfortable and how it relates to this topic. So back when I was first assigned CIS 110 for the spring, I was working on my syllabus. And from my teaching experience in the community college before, I fully knew that my census date was available inside WebAdvisor. And I looked and I looked and I knew it was in the table in terms of, I knew where to look inside a WebAdvisor, but I just couldn't find it. So I literally walked across the hall and said something to Crystal, and I was like, something's wrong. Like, I don't see my census date. Well, all I didn't do was click on the link for the course. As soon as I clicked on the link for the course, it took me to the next view where I was then able to see my census date where I had been looking for it before. So, you know, that is one thing that we don't do except for at the beginning of an individual semester. And so if you're teaching only 16-week courses and you do that in the fall and in the spring, and then maybe you don't do that in the summer, that's something you do twice a year. And so is it okay? Like, is that going to happen? Yes, that's going to happen. Just the other day, I asked Melissa, and I told her when I asked her, I said, I'm going to ask probably one of the dumbest questions. But I said, how do I no-show a student? And so I had literally looked inside a web advisor at everything, the E's, the A's, the L's, the EL's, nonstop. The minute that I asked her that question, I look to the left and I see all the check boxes that have no-shows. We're all going to be uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form. Those were things that I hadn't done since I taught a course 4 years ago. And so I learned those real quick. But we have to understand that, you know, this is a completely different situation. Pretty much all of us, I'm sure, in some way, shape, or form, have spent most of our time that we've been in the field of education teaching in a face-to-face course. We can do nothing ahead of time, walk into that course because we are the subject matter experts, and we can teach a whole entire lesson, 2 lessons, 3 lessons, lecture, do whatever we want at the drop of a hat without even thinking about it. And don't even pay attention to the motions that we go through. But then when it comes to this online world, we now have to think about, well, how is everything structured? You know, where is it? What is it? All that type stuff. So getting into that and talking about the uncomfortable, I'll escape out of this again and I'll go back to the course. So one of the things that I do in addressing some of this is that I get into, and I'll be honest, I got this idea partially from the work that I do in my full-time job, but also from a meeting I had earlier in the fall with Jenny Smith and how she had structured her classes. And so one of the things that I started to change, instead of having all this randomness, is that I started to pull it together in what you sort of saw when I first opened up the course. So if I go to Module 1, Computer Basics, what I've done now is I've edited the details for these sections. So if you're not familiar with the terminologies of Moodle, each of these, like where I have Module 1, Module 2, Module 3, those are called sections. And so when you create a new section, that section has a description area at the top, and so you can add to it. And so what I've done is I've actually broken that up with headings and information. And so now if I'm a student coming into this module, I have a much better idea of what's going on in terms of, you know, what I should be doing, where I should be going, how should it work, all that type stuff. So I know that I have stuff that's due by January 18th. And then I go down and I have certain things I need to read. I have links directly to all of those items, so I can click right from there. I have a detailed information, which normally would have been linked. This is in development. This is not something that this is not my actual section of CIS 110. Sorry, my screen's doing funny things. This is where I'm playing around with designing some things, and I have my module objectives. And then I get to the bottom, and if I go to the bottom, I have all of that disorganization. I have that there because that's the limitation of how Moodle works. If I wanted to take any of these items, say Computer Basics Test, and that's what I wanted to have in my nice detailed pieces at the top, then I could actually, what I would do is I would just click on the link and open that. I would go up and get the link for that item and right click and choose copy. And then I could go back to where I was and I could go up into the details for that section. If I go back to, sorry, it went back to the beginning of the course. There we go. I could go back up into that section and I could edit that section. And now what I can do is I can go under readings and I can go down in the assessments and I can add a new bullet. And I'm just going to say test for now. I don't remember what it was called off the top of my head. I don't want it bold, but I can add the link to that. So let me do that. And so now I have that when I save changes, I have that organized for my students to be able to see. So one of the things that, I just went in the last slide and I talked about what's uncomfortable for us. There's also a side that's uncomfortable for students. And for a lot of students, navigating all kinds of different courses that use all kinds of different setups, designs, and everything else like that can be a barrier because they get lost in trying to find or figure out what they're looking for and what they're doing. And so that simply works without them having to go down through all the messiness at the bottom. Now, could they if they wanted to? Yes, they could, but it's a way of really organizing and structuring things in the course. So with that being said, that gets us through the first little bit of what we're talking about in our session. So let me show this in my actual course in CIS 110 that I'm teaching now live this spring. So you can see how I've done this with the different items, because I've done this with the MCEQ or the MCEA and everything else. So I do have we'll get into the welcome in a minute, but I took the section information for course syllabus and getting started, and I adjusted that the same way. So I did an introduction welcome. This is CIS 110. I did the textbook where they have the link to get directly to where they need to go to get access to everything in SAM and talk to them about how to create their account. And then I have information about the 14-day attendance policy. We'll go over that in a minute. But I have, the readings and the videos. If you want to, this is a discussion forum that they have to do. I believe I can click into this because it's not going to show. Yep. So I won't scroll down too far because if I do, you'll see student data and information. And I know that's not something I can share, but it does open in a new window so they can go straight to it. They can participate in that discussion forum. They don't have to scroll through anything, navigate. When they're done, they just close it out and they're right back to the course where they stopped and where they clicked that link. Same thing for the MCAE. Except I didn't put that one in a new window. And so now you can see by not doing that in a new window, now I'm in a place where, there's a problem. But on top of that, one of the things that I did, and I did this intentionally in one course, and I think I accidentally did it in my live course, thinking it was in the test course. But when you get to this page, notice that it talks about, whoops, there's no census date there. That information wasn't changed. And I was doing that intentionally, but again, I think I did that in the wrong section. So it's actually in my live section. I need to fix that. We need to visit our own courses and work our way through things so that we can catch things like this, because this is something that's quite frequently seen in a bunch of courses where all of a sudden my students are clicking this to open it up and wait a minute, it still says instructors change this to match the census date located on your roster. So that doesn't look really good. So while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and adjust that really fast. So it was January 21st. Okay. And so I'll make sure that that date is in there. I've been bouncing back and forth between the courses too much, and I accidentally copied and pasted the wrong thing. So anyways, so I'm creating the activity first. I kind of skipped ahead of that. So what I do is with the getting started, when I create that discussion forum, is I go to the very bottom and I go ahead and create a learning activity. And then that's where I choose, it just happens to be an open forum. And so I go through that process that we've traditionally used, and I set it up so that, I give it a name, I add my description, I go down and I change it. I like to use the Q&A because that forces students to have to post before they see anyone else's response. I set it up. When I'm done, I do save and display, and that takes me right to the page. And then I just grab that URL, and that's what I paste into those instructions. So let me jump back to my courses. It's done a fit because I didn't save what I was doing. So with that being said, let me jump back over to the presentation because I don't want to get too far off, and I know we're already halfway through and there's still a lot of things that I wanted to talk about. So we've gotten through the being uncomfortable part. And so now I want to jump into real fast. The next thing I want to talk about are instructor introductions. So the initial introduction creates a sense of connection between the instructor and the learners. Things that you should include are your name, your title, a photo or a video. It's up to you, optional, whichever you choose to do. A little bit about your field of expertise, your email, your phone, your office hours. Now, if you're an adjunct, there's a little bit different there in terms of the phone. Sometimes you have a phone on campus, sometimes you don't. And you don't always necessarily want to post your cell phone number there for all students to be able to have access to. So some of that may vary a little bit based on your role. And then some other things that you can include are your teaching philosophy, past online teaching experience, personal hobbies, families, travel, etc. Part of this is so one of the things, and you'll see it on a couple slides and a couple things that we'll mention in the presentation, but one of the things that leads to a lot of students dropping out of online courses, persistence, that impacts persistence, is feeling of being isolated and not knowing like that. I mean, I don't know how many of you are like me, but I would much rather us be sitting together in a room with computers and devices in front of us, having this conversation, working through it together, looking over each other's shoulders, sharing ideas, having conversations, all that type stuff. But that doesn't happen in an online course. And as a result, everyone can start to feel disconnected in some way, shape, or form. And I think we've all experienced a lot of that since we've been doing this since last March, almost a whole year now, 2 months shy of that. And so these are some things that you can do to kind of build that connection between you and your students to make it more realistic. Are we ever going to have that same feeling of conversation and feeling of being in the same room at the same time, having those live discussions? Maybe to a point, but not ever fully will we ever get there. So these are some things we can do. And so I want to get into the instructor introductions. I posted, so if I go into this particular course, which we're using the online course design course, if I go into that, when you get in, I've started building the course. It's not all put together. The first page is not. But in any course, in the first section is the announcements, the course announcements. So if I go into a course announcement, there are 2 ways that I like to accomplish this task. And they're based on best practices. So one, best practices say that as an online instructor, you should ahead of time go in and send all of your students an email a day or 2 before the course starts so they know where to go, what to do, and how to get started. And we all say, but our students aren't enrolled into the course, or the course is not made active to our students until such and such time on the day the courses are activate. So for this semester, for most people, it was January 11th. However, we do have live enrollment data inside of WebAdvisor and do have the ability to send all of our students an email from in WebAdvisor. So we do have a template. We need to revise it because it's a little older. It was put together when I was at Mitchell in 2016. But we do have a template that you could actually copy from and take bits and pieces of to use to create that initial email to send to your students. So I do that first. I do that like classes started on a Monday. I tried to get that out by middle of the day to the end of the day on Friday so that students would know on Monday, on day 1, where they need to go to get started in the course. Because it's one thing to look at a schedule and see that I'm in building A, room 104, and know exactly where building A 104 is. It's something totally different to have an online course be my first online course, never really know, and try to log into, like, maybe I don't even know how to get to where I log into the learning management system as a student, or maybe I know how to get there, but once I'm in there, I really don't understand what I'm supposed to do. And so, you know, that helps with that piece. But in terms of the instructor introduction, I then go in and add an announcement. And in that announcement, I talk about a bunch of the things that I just showed. Now, I didn't put in this one the information in terms of my email, my office hours, and all of that type stuff, because this is just kind of introducing me. So I did it in text format, which is a little bit different. And then I created a video that's a short, I'd say 2 to 5 minute video real fast that students can watch, where I included myself. Not sure why it's not. I loaded it a minute ago. It may still be loading. Anyway, so they can go in and read and watch and get to know who I am. So that's a way to do it. I like to do it in video format. Everything that I do is in video format for the most part, where I walk through stuff. So what I usually do is when I use Screencast-O-Matic to do it, I go down and I make sure that I turn on both my screen recording and my camera, so it has a little picture of me walking them through, so I'm an actual person as we go through stuff. Now, when I do my introduction, I don't have, of course, a screen. It's just a video of me introducing myself. But that's a good way to let students kind of get to know you as a faculty member and instructor. So as we move from that, the next thing that's on the list, and this has been one of the most valuable pieces for me as an online instructor that I've done over the years. When I get to the next slide, we get into student introductions. And so learner introductions at the beginning of the class help to create a welcoming learning environment and a sense of community. Physical separation, and this is what I was talking about a minute ago, physical separation of individual students in online education has led to students feeling isolated and a major cause of confusion and anxiety. So all those different things. So what do we do in terms of student introductions? Well, for me, it's very simple, but for you, it could be something completely different. Depends on, you know, what subject you're teaching, whether it's a face-to-face, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's an online course, whether you actually get to meet in person or not. But what I do is a simple discussion forum. And if I go back to my courses and I go back to CIS 110, where I was a minute ago, and show you that discussion forum. By the way, I do have my information on the front page of the course, where it says welcome to the course. That's where I put my name, my email address, and then I'm still working with my students. We're trying to work together to figure out, they all have different availabilities, and so I'm trying to work to set a couple different series of office hours, so I kind of get those that need some assistance during the day and those that need some assistance during the evening. So those will be posted soon. But if I go into getting started in a course syllabus and I go down to the part where they had the assignment of the getting to know you discussion, I set up a simple discussion forum where I tell them, so class started on a Monday. I said that their initial post was due by Thursday, January 14th by 11:59 p.m. and that the final response, like the responses to their classmates, were due by January 17th. Now, one thing is that I don't cut this off at the end of January 17th, because my goal is not to make sure with this thing that they're really addressing a due date. My goal is to really honestly get to know the students that are in my course that semester for a number of different reasons. And so if I go into that discussion, I'll show what I include, and I can give you a copy of the questions that I asked, but I broke it into two parts, and I basically give an introduction to it and tell why we do it. But in the first set of questions, they are all mandatory, and they have to add, you know, what's your major and why, the things that I would like to accomplish the most this semester. The thing that I would like to accomplish the most this semester is what types of technology do you use at home and work, and then upload an appropriate picture of yourself. Now, I do this for a couple different reasons in terms of the picture. There may be times throughout the semester where I may have to meet that. I do have, you know, a part-time office on campus. So there may be a time where a student needs help and they want to come in person and get help. By having that picture there, I know who I'm looking for when they're supposed to be coming. Also, kind of like if there were an opportunity throughout the semester where eventually they would be able to get together again face to face, we would kind of have an idea of who everyone is, and we wouldn't just be random people kind of trying to run into each other. So that's why I have the picture piece there. Then the second set of questions, I get into where they have choice, and choice is a good thing. So I put 8 different questions. These are interchangeable. And some of them I like to do based on the course that I'm teaching, and others I do based on a variety of different things. And some are even, you know, the personal side of it. Where's somewhere you would like to travel if you could go anywhere in the world? Very generic question, but we learn a lot. If students prefer not to upload a picture of themselves, I do not count off towards it. I've had very, very few in the years that I've done this that have actually said that they don't want to upload a picture of themselves, but I do not count off if they decide not to do that. I do put that it's mandatory, and each of those things are worth 5 points. But when it gets to that, I work with the scoring itself. So I don't make it a punitive thing if they decide not to do that. But then, of course, like with the questions that I have. So what do I get out of this? Well, what I get out of this is what I'm going to show on the next slide, because I can't show you my actual conversations that have happened. But I will say that the deadline I showed a minute ago for responding to your classmates was January 17th. I will say that this conversation, when I checked it yesterday, had continued on till at least January 21st. It continued far past when I intended it to, and students were still interacting with each other and making connections between themselves and everything else. So let's look at this in the actual course, because, or sorry, in the presentation, I've pulled out, I've done some data mining of that discussion forum on the next slide, so I can tell you what this has taught me about my students and how it impacts me in online course design. So out of this, before I get to that, one very, very important piece of these discussions is that when you have a course discussion, it's very important for the instructor to be a part of that discussion for a number of different reasons. So Dr. Michelle Everson came up with this. I took this quote from her, and I want to read it for a minute. In the online course, I'm able to witness every group discussion from start to finish, and I'm able to carefully review the contributions to discussion made by each student in the class. If students are struggling, I can reach out to those students and offer extra assistance. If I'm able to learn much more than I am able to learn much more than I ever could in a classroom setting about how students think through different problems and the hurdles they face along the way as they attempt to solve these problems. So, you know, there's a couple different things. You know, you could have ethical issues inside the discussion, and if you're not participating in them as the instructor, you wouldn't know that. They could get out of control real quick. You could have misconceptions or misinformation being passed around inside the discussion forum. And so those things are all very important and contribute. But what is the value in all this? And that's on the next slide. So in this spring in CIS 110, I have 22 students. And so what do I know about those 22 students? I know that 5 of those are majoring in computer science and engineering or information technology, one of those 3 areas. 2 of those have already built their own computers, and 2 are interested in cybersecurity. Why is that important? If you're not familiar with CIS 110, it's basically introduction to computers. There's 2 parts to the course. The first half is all about basically the operating system, the hardware, the software, you know, how do machines work, how do they function, all that type stuff. I'm sitting here in the first 5 modules the first 2 weeks of the course, in the first 6 modules that are taught in the first 2 weeks, teaching about what a hard drive is, teaching about what RAM is, teaching about the parts of a computer to 5 students, 2 of which have already built their own computer. So they're already disconnected from the course content, but I'm teaching it because that's what the course learning objectives and everything say that I have to do. So one of the things where I'm most uncomfortable, but have a vision of going at some point in time, is that I would love to find a way to personalize the course so that I can fast track those students through that part and focus more on some ideas of how can I stay within the realm of the SLOs and still cover some things that are going to be more impactful for them in their major versus, okay, let me teach you what a hard drive is. Let me teach you what RAM is. So I know that about those students. I also have 4 that are majoring in business administration and in accounting. And I pulled out one of the facts from one of those 4 students. I have another one that's certified already in Word and PowerPoint. The second half of this course is all about Microsoft Office. It's Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Access. So now I'm going to have, when we get to that point, I'm going to have the dilemma of teaching at least one of my students the basic functions and processes used in Word and PowerPoint when they're already Microsoft certified in those 2 subject areas. But it does kind of give me an idea of, you know, the makeup of my students. I also know that I have a secondary science major who wants to teach high school science, one in fire protection. And then also out of all that, I found out that I have 4 different students that want to transfer to UNC Charlotte and 1 to UNC Wilmington. And so some of that kind of plays into, I have taught ACA 122 before, and so I can have some conversations, maybe not related directly exactly to CIS 110, but related to educational goals that I can tie into the course. So it's very impactful that I can know this information as I work through the course and see different pieces of different things that we're doing along the way. Do any of you already do something similar in terms of, some refer to them as icebreakers, getting to know you type thing? Do any of you already do something like that in your course? And if you do, you know, what does it look like? Is it similar or different? Yeah, so, you know, you're right. I teach one section of CIS 110, and I do this in this one section. I don't go through and do a rubric in terms of that introduction discussion because, you know, I could get caught up in the details. I don't focus on spelling and grammar. I don't do all those other things. I just kind of quickly take a glance and eyeball it and look and see, yes, I have these people who have participated. The good thing is Moodle has some really good logs that you can kind of click in, and you can kind of use the data from those logs and kind of an eyeball in the course to kind of get a good idea. And I just do it like a sort of all or nothing type thing in the end. Like I do say it's worth 5 points, but I get a glance. But yes, it can get kind of heavy. The more students you have, the higher number of sections you have, but it is something that's still valuable. And so we can do that in different ways. This is not the only way you do that. This is just the way that I've done it. There is a book, and we're going to get to that in just a minute, that has some really good different ideas that you can build into your course along the way, where it's not necessarily always at the beginning. But yeah, some do it, some don't, but it is something that's really valuable to add to your course, and it's research-based as well. So it's not just something that we've kind of come up with and said, hey, here, look, this is something else for you to do. You know, there's some research behind it. I'm not going to go into presentation mode. I'll just go ahead and hit the last slide. These are customer service items that we talk about. This includes showing students where to get started, explaining the importance of the course components and the purpose and structure of the course. And some of those things include like the 14-day attendance policy, technology requirements, computer skills, digital literacy, prerequisite. A lot of that stuff is already in your syllabus. It's just good to make sure that you highlight where those items are so students know. And to do that, I like to do a walkthrough video. So I want to look at a couple of my announcements in CIS 110. One thing I like to do is a weekly announcement. So I do my course based on a week. Each week we have new assignments. They're due Sunday evenings. There's also a discussion in terms about, you know, Sunday evenings versus Monday evenings and how that works out. I won't get into that in here today. Maybe we get into that some in the discussion forums that are associated with this session 1. But if I go to my announcements, so if I go to the main page and I go down to announcements, you'll see a list of announcements that I've posted so far. So I have, you know, week 1, there was something else I talked about in week 1 where we had to, I helped them get started with MindTap or SAM. It's third-party software that's used to teach CIS 110. But in the Welcome to CIS 110 and getting started, in that announcement, I did a walkthrough video where I would go through and actually show parts of the course. So if I go into that.
Hello, and welcome to CIS 110 for the spring 2021 semester. My name is Dr. Chris Smith, and I'm going to be your instructor. Or by going to Cengage and the Unlimited page, and you can look at that. There is a link to get some technical support from Cengage. I did want to point out the note in the middle on attendance and due dates. This is a fully online course at this time. I do not plan to have any required synchronous virtual meetings. I will be available for those if you need to set up a time to meet with me to work through something in the course. But in terms of the entire course, I do not have to be an opportunity that we.
So I'm not going to play the whole entire video. It is a little bit longer. That first one is a little bit longer because of the information that I include in it on getting started. Usually I like to try to keep them between 5 and 10 minutes. It depends, because if I'm actually doing a walkthrough, I may stretch it just a little bit more. Usually 12 minutes is about as long as I'll allow a video to go. If it's going to get up past that amount of time, then I'll kind of break up the topics and create multiple announcements or multiple topics. But I do this each week. So if I go back into those announcements, each week at the beginning of the week, I go through what they're supposed to be learning or talking about, what's due, all that type stuff. So I have it, and I believe I put it in list format. Some of them in announcements I do, others I don't. So they know exactly what to look for, what to do. And so that helps set those expectations. That allows them to see where things are, how to navigate them. I actually go into SAM, I click on the activity so they know where to locate it within the software and do different things like that. So, but I do thank each and every one of you, and that will conclude. I'll go ahead and turn the recording off.